welcome back to the Three-Handed Bandits channel. It's Nathan back with another breakdown for you today, unveiling the 20th ranked Pittsburgh Steelers in our 2023 to 2024 preseason power rankings. The Steelers last year found yet another way to squeak out a winning record in the Mike Tomlin era, and I think they could be in store for another very similar season. He's done it with a 40,000-year-old Big Ben and a rookie quarterback in Kenny Pickett. So I think he's going to be able to find another way to manage to do that. Before we talk about the team's offseason, their coaching, and their roster talent as well, please go ahead, like, subscribe, and stick around as we unveil the rest of the teams in our power rankings. And so obviously, as I said today, we're talking about the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think this is a team that does not have a whole lot of expectations on a very, very loaded AFC. I do still think that this roster has a lot of talent, and with this coaching staff, obviously, does have the potential to obviously win a lot of games. Let's go ahead and talk about their offseason real quick. So on the offensive side, they're going to bring in Allen Robinson, kind of give him another option at wide receiver. And then in the third round, they draft Darnell Washington and tight end to give them another receiving option as well. Their first round pick was Broderick Jones, hopefully trying to get some more star talent on that offensive line. They also bring in Isaac Sayamalu and Nate Herbig. In the second round, they go ahead and draft Keanu Benton, interior lineman. They also bring in Nick Herbig in the fourth round, Marcus Golden to kind of help out that edge group. They're also bringing Cole Holcomb and Landon Roberts to kind of help replace their starters at linebacker. They also bring in Chandon Sullivan, Joey Porter, and Pat Peterson to help fill out this cornerback room, as well as bringing in Keanu Neal. Obviously, they got rid of Chase Claypool last year in the trade in the middle of the year. They also got rid of Chris Wormley and Tyson Alalu on this interior defensive line. They also lose Malik Reed on the edge linebacker. They lose Miles Jack and Devin Bush, who were not great for them. They're also losing Cam Sutton, which is a cornerback that I really like, as well as Arthur Mallet and Akello Witherspoon and Terrell Edmonds. So overall, I do think it's a pretty plus offseason for this team. I think they brought in decent players on offense to help boost this offense. On defense, they did get rid of guys who are kind of just role players or not super productive for this team. I do think the loss of Cam Sutton and Terrell Edmonds are two pretty good players that they're going to be sad that they couldn't hold on to. But overall, I do think that this roster is still pretty talented, and they're not going to have very many holes. However, one of the biggest things this offseason that the Steelers did not do was they didn't fire Matt Canada. So let's go and talk about this coaching staff real quick. And obviously, it is still Mike Tomlin's team, and he is obviously still an excellent leader and continued this line of great Steelers coaches. And he's definitely one of the top 5 to 10 head coaches in the NFL. He has a real unparalleled leadership compared to any coach in the NFL, and the way he's managed to keep his boys fighting, to constantly buy into the scheme is really remarkable. They're going to be running this real attacking 3-4 defense. It is Blitzburgh with a bunch of blitzes and stunts and being really aggressive on that side of the ball. And the last couple of years, it's really worked for them, especially since they got TJ Watt. But overall, you feel really good about Mike Tomlin. But I think Steelers fans can attest to how upsetting it is that they kept Matt Canada. So Matt Canada was a guy who just was bouncing around in the college ranks forever. And they randomly snapped him up. And he's been their offensive coordinator last year. And he just was not very good. His offense is just very basic, very vanilla. There's not a whole lot of creativity, not a whole lot of scheming open your best players. There's a lot of it's almost like a Madden offense, just very basic plays, and that's held back this team last year. And overall, I do think it's going to continue to hold this team back. I think he's definitely proven out of all the offensive coordinators in the league that are returning that he is the worst one. He may not be the worst one, just depending on some of these new hires, but overall, you're just not very optimistic about this offensive coaching. But on the defense, they also have Terrell Austin, who's going to help implement this scheme for the Steelers. So for your overall coaching, you do feel really good. Just a little bit less about the offensive coaching and coordinating, in the play calling. But overall, this is going to be a well-coached team with Mike Tomlin at the top, and he's not going to settle for, um, you know, weak work ethic and making mistakes. Like, he's going to have a very well-coached, disciplined team. But let's go ahead and talk about this offense. That's going to start off with Kenny Pickett, who was pretty decent as a rookie. He wasn't phenomenal, wasn't a real top 10 elite guy, but he's a very adequate starter. He has a pretty high floor, but I don't know how high his ceiling is. But he does have, his arm strength is legit. He does have the arm strength to hang in the NFL. However, his accuracy is just a little bit sporadic. But overall, he really just doesn't have a whole lot of true weaknesses. He doesn't have a whole lot of true strengths as well. But he does have really good running ability. He has pretty good decision making, pretty okay, pocket presence, pretty good processing. So overall, as a quarterback, he's just a very, very safe, high floor quarterback who may not necessarily win you games like a Mahomes or Josh Allen, but really isn't going to cost you games. And he's a really, really good player. I don't know if he's gonna get this team to really winning a Super Bowl. But I feel like, with him at the helm, he's not gonna, have you threatening for a top 5 pick. Behind him, you have Mitch Trubisky and Mason Rudolph. Mitch Trubisky kind of proved that he just is not really a starter at this point, and Mason Rudolph hopefully doesn't have to see the field ever. But overall, you feel pretty good about Kenny Pickett and what he's bringing heading into year 2. You're also going to be feeling better about this offense with some of these receiving weapons that they do have. And so Deontay Johnson has been their number 1 for the last couple of years. And he is one of the best separators in the NFL. He's a really great route runner. His stop-start ability is really good, and his ability to go into and out of cuts really helps him get open and find separation at the catch point and at the breaks of his routes. And he has, the ability to make some insane catches, but he might have one of the worst drop reels in the NFL. He just have random times where he's just running across the middle of the field and just stops paying attention and drops the ball. So that's held him back from being a true, number 1, elite receiver. And I think you'd rather have him as a number 2 guy to be a quick kind of get open guy for you. But he's not going to carry a passing game. And but overall, I do think you're pretty happy that you have him. But I do think there is a lot of hype for George Pickens, and I think it's rightly so. Body type, physically speaking, he is very similar to AJ Green. Size-wise, I think he's an inch shorter and a couple pounds lighter, but, combine, he physically tested very similar. He's got the same kind of build as this, tall, lanky wide receiver. And he's developed into, well, he's a rookie, but he's has the ability to develop, hopefully, and to route running to kind of take that step up to be an AJ Green-esque figure. But he's got a great set of hands, and his contested catch ability is definitely up there. And as he does have the potential to grow into this, AJ Green-esque figure. So I feel pretty good about him, and the arrow's certainly trending up. We just need to see more development in the receiving game. But him and Kenny Pickett showed decent chemistry last year, and so I'll give them another year. I think they'll be able to develop even more chemistry. And I think Kenny Pickett, having the ability to just throw to George Pickens' back shoulder, when he's in doubt, is going to be a really effective way of moving the ball for this team, just because he is such a dominant contested catch, ball winner. And if he develops into that number 1 guy, then you're going to be feeling even better about this receiving game, because it's going to help Deontay Johnson be more of a number 2, and he's really going to be able to exploit, secondary corners. They also bring in Allen Robinson, who I'm just not expecting a whole lot from anymore at this point. His last couple of years in Chicago, everything really kind of started to fall off. I just think he stopped caring, and he just definitely is not the same Allen Robinson that he was once when he was a true number 1 guy. And then last year in the Rams, he was just a total non-factor. He didn't really do anything for them last year. So I'm just not really expecting much from him, and I think, this is kind of just the Steelers kind of just throwing a dart to maybe see if he can, give you something. Worst case, he's just a solid, 3rd wide receiver, so that way you don't have to have, Miles Boykin, Gunnar, Olszewski, or Calvin Austin on the field. Then tight end, Pat Freiermuth is your guy. He's a really, really solid tight end. He's a top 10 tight end and just kind of does everything at a pretty good level. Doesn't have any true elite trait to make him, a Travis Kelce-esque figure. But he doesn't do anything poor. He's just really, really good at every single thing that he does. Then your other kind of receiving options, it's going to be Najee Harris and Jalen Warren. Jalen Warren is a really exciting kind of receiving third down, running back who is really explosive when he gets the ball in the passing game. And then Najee Harris is also a pretty decent pass catcher who can catch the ball, off screens or dump downs and get you a couple tough yards. I do think Jalen Warren's going to see a lot of third down work this year. He's a pretty good blocker, pass blocker, very willing, but also he just has a little bit more as a receiving back than Najee does. He's really explosive. He's, not quite Austin Eckler, but 5'8", 215. He's a very similar player. And so overall, I do think you have a pretty good, receiving group. It's, deep. You have, 4 to 5 really solid options. And then depth-wise, at the wide receiver position, Miles Boykin is kind of just a big body guy, decent blocker, but not really expecting much from him in the receiving game. Calvin Austin is a guy who could have some potential. He's got insane speed, and so maybe if, he's schemed up, which probably won't happen in this Matt Canada offense, but if he's schemed up, can be a little bit of a deep threat or just a speed threat gadget player for this team. And Gunnar Olszewski is just a real okay wide receiver. Doesn't really do anything that well. And then tight end position, obviously they drafted Darnell Washington in the 3rd round. Has some development to do. As a rookie tight end, rookie tight ends have struggled. But he has the tools to be a really good blocker and to be a real big body ball winner for this team. I'm not really expecting much from him as a rookie, but I do think he's going to develop pretty well for the Steelers roster. Then they also got Zach Gentry, who's kind of just a number 3 tight end. But overall, the starting guys you're going to have out there are all talented in their own right and have a couple different skill sets. So I do think you feel pretty good about this receiving group. They don't have a true number 1 yet. We do think George Pickens is going to get there. But until he does, that's going to hold this unit back from being, one of the best units in the league just because they don't have a true number 1, we need a bucket type of player. But you don't have, a whole lot of weaknesses in this unit either. When it comes to running backs, obviously we got Najee Harris and Jalen Warren. I think Najee Harris is going to have a lot of the first and second down work. He's just real inconsistent as a runner. Sometimes he has insane vision. Sometimes he's kind of just running into nothing. And, sometimes he can, break a couple tackles, hurdle a guy, be real shifty. And sometimes he kind of just gets hit and goes down very easily. But as we saw, he had a really phenomenal rookie year. I just don't know if he's really, quite what we kind of had the hype of him as a rookie, especially with Jalen Warren, who's kind of developed. I do think it's going to take a lot of the workload from Najee Harris. But overall, I still think he's a pretty decent runner of the ball, and, obviously you're still glad that you have him. But he's definitely not a Saquon Barkley, Christian McCaffrey, Derrick Henry, level threat. At least he hasn't proven to be that just yet. Then Jalen Warren, he's not as great as a runner of the ball. He is a smaller guy. He's really going to get most of his production in the receiving game. But, he's got some athleticism, got some burst. So, maybe he can be an okay, change of pace back every now and then. Then you got Anthony McFarland here, which who even cares about that guy? He's been horrible when he's out there. You got a pretty decent running back room. If Najee Harris was closer to being the kind of real, top 10, top 8 running back that we thought he was coming out, and that's obviously going to help boost this offense, but I think he's kind of just an okay running back. And then this offensive line is pretty solid. Doesn't have a whole lot of weaknesses, but doesn't have, any true great players on this team. So it's going to start off with Broderick Jones, who they drafted in the 1st round. Coming out of Georgia, very similar to like an Andrew Thomas. He's, this insane athlete and does have a lot of high-end traits, athleticism to where he could develop into a really good player. And the Steelers have been a team that's been really good about developing their offensive linemen. So I think you feel pretty good about him. But I do think he's going to struggle kind of like a lot of rookie tackles do who aren't, Big Ten guys. He's going to struggle with, he's going to have some poor technique, and I do think he's going to take some lumps as a pass blocker. I do think there's going to be some guys who are really going to be able to take advantage of him. But hopefully he will be able to develop that in time and be a pretty decent starter for them. But he does have decent size, decent strength, and a decent get off to be a plus run blocker as a rookie. But worst case, he also got Dan Moore here as a backup, who Broderick Jones is a complete turnstile and a complete liability you can throw in, who will give you a kind of steady hand as a pass blocker, but will give you a little bit less as a run blocker. But overall, I do think, if they end up having to bench Broderick Jones because he's a liability or not, I do think you're going to get pretty solid play out of this tackle position. And then the guard position, they bring in Isaac Seumalo from the Eagles, who's just an absolute fire hydrant of a pass blocker. He's just this big, hulked up Samoan dude. So as a pass blocker, he is a pretty good blocker, but he doesn't quite have this insane athleticism to really blow people off the ball in the running game. But he's still a decent run blocker. And then they also have Kevin Dotson as depth, who's kind of just a slightly worse version of Isaac Seumalo. You can say, the same things. He's a pretty decent pass blocker and a pretty decent run blocker, but just a little bit worse at both of those things than Isaac Seumalo. Then they got Mason Cole at center, who was drafted in 2017 and didn't really quite develop. Found his way to Minnesota, had a good year under Bradbury, and then they bring him last year, and he played really well for them, and so now he's back. He's this big, strong mauler dude, and so, in one of these, head-up blocking schemes, he does have the strength to move people, and he's just an okay pass blocker, but, he's still found a way to develop, so maybe there's just a little bit more development in there for him with this coaching staff. Right guard, you got James Daniels. Really good, good pass blocker, good run blocker. And also has some positional flexibility to play at center for them just in case Mason Cole does go down or doesn't quite work out. And then they bring in Nate Herbig, who's this big monster mauling run blockers. Would be a low-end starter, but still pretty good at pass blocking and run blocking. And then Chukwuma Okorafor at right tackle has been here for a while now, and is definitely a very low-end starter. Starter quality, but very, very low-end. But yeah, he's a, decent-ish run blocker. A little bit worse as a pass blocker. So I do think there could be true liability on this offensive line for the pass blocking from the tackles. But overall, you do have a pretty solid offensive line here. They also do have Kendrick Green, who just hasn't really developed. So you're not really expecting anything from him. He just doesn't have the strength to really hold up in the NFL. But overall, you do have a pretty solid offensive line. And you have probably the best depth out of any, group. You have 3 really capable backups. And then 5 pretty capable starters. So overall, you're going to have a pretty decent offensive line. You're not going to have, a real top 10 unit just because you don't have any great players on this offensive line. But overall, you do have a lot of pretty solid players. And that is kind of just the general theme for this offense, is you have a lot of good players, but you do need to develop some stars, especially if the coaching is going to be poor here. The star talent can kind of help you get through that, which they just don't really have yet. But this offense just doesn't really have any weaknesses outside of Matt Canada and the play calling and coaching. But this defense is where this team gets really exciting. It's going to start on this D-line, which is going to be one of the best pass rushes in the NFL, and that's going to start with T.J. Watt, who's in this tier 1 of true elite edge rushers, with Myles Garrett's, Bosa's, Parsons, Crosby's. He's really good. Not much to say about him. He's one of the best guys, but he also has the ability to kind of drop back into coverage and lurk and, make some plays and maybe try to either get a couple deflections or, pick or two. But overall, you're absolutely excited that you have him, and when he's healthy, this is a top 5 defense. Your other edge, they just signed Alex Highsmith to a pretty big extension, And he's a really good player. He's kind of just a slightly worse version of TJ Watt, but wins in the same way. He's a very similar player and is still a really good player. Not, a true, number one edge rusher, but it's definitely one of the best number two guys in the league. And then Cameron Hayward on the interior, to me, is still one of the elite interior presences in the league. At 34 now, he hasn't fallen off, and I'm not going to believe that's going to happen yet. Father Time wins at some point, but hasn't come from him yet, so I do expect another great year. He's really consistent. He's this big, strong-ass dude, so, he can stop the run, but he still can get after the quarterback like some of the best. So you got three really good presences there. That's going to make the job a lot easier for this rookie, Keanu Benton. He's going to come in and hopefully be a pretty decent run defender for them and can develop as a good nose. And then Larry Ogunjobi is kind of just a low-end starter. He's going to, as your fourth, fifth option, getting after the quarterback, he's a, pretty decent player. And some depth-wise, I got Marcus Golden, bring him from Arizona. Really low-end guy, but he's going to be able to defend the run and get after the quarterback at an okay level. I also got Nick Herbig, the brother of the other Herbig brother, who will hopefully develop into another Alex Highsmith, TJ Watt-esque figure. And on the interior line, they got some okay depth in DeMarvin Leal, Braden Fajoko, Montravius Adams, and Armon Watts. They're all going to be some rotational pieces that can come in and kind of defend the run. But overall, if you got TJ Watt, Cameron Hayward, and Alex Highsmith out there, you're going to be getting after the quarterback because it's going to be really hard to block all three of these guys at the same time. And then looking at this linebacking group, it's kind of just a weaker group. Cole Holcomb's just a very, decent linebacker. Okay coverage, okay in defending the run. He's not going to be a liability out there, but he's nowhere close to being a Fred Warner, Demario Davis, Drake Greenlaw. He's just a very solid, okay linebacker. And Landon Roberts is a pretty good run defender. However, he does kind of struggle as a, in coverage. He's a bit of a liability out there. While Cole Holcomb's kind of, okay at, defending the run and defending the pass. Landon Roberts is much better at defending the run, but very much worse at defending the pass. So he's a bit of a liability. But they do bring in Keanu Neal, who kind of can come in and play a little bit of linebacker and kind of a dime package to kind of help ease some of Landon Roberts' kind of coverage, coverage abilities and lack thereof. He'll be able to kind of be a little bit of a Band-Aid over that. But Landon Roberts is still going to be out there a lot and is still going to be in coverage a lot. So could be a bit of a weak spot there. They also have Tanner Muse, who's a really exciting piece, just an absolute insane athlete, was a safety and now converted to linebacker, but ran like a 4.4. So maybe he can develop into a good player. He was okay last year in Seattle, so maybe in this scheme they can scheme him up. He's got insane athleticism, so having that at the linebacker position, it's worth throwing the dart and see if he can develop. And then you got Nick Kwiatkowski. It's just a real low-end veteran guy. He's smart, knows what he's doing, but kind of just a worse version of Cole Holcomb at this point in his career. But, with how good this, D-line is and how good the secondary is, you won't really need to rely on these guys to carry this defense. But overall, I do think this is going to be a pretty good secondary as well. It's going to start off with Minkah Fitzpatrick, who is an absolute beast back there. He's, elite safety. He's got range to really make plays and ball hawk. He's not afraid to come up and hit you either. One of the best guys, got great range, great athleticism, and overall, it's going to help this defense, especially on the back end. Then, second round, they drafted Joey Porter Jr., the son of Joey Porter, who's a former Pittsburgh Steeler, and as a team that is going to be a real aggressive 3-4 defense. They wanted, a press man corner, and that's what Joey Porter is. He's one of the better man corners in this draft, and so you're hoping he's going to be able to come in as a rookie and give you solid man coverage play. A lot of, rookie corners do struggle, so he could definitely take his lumps. I do think he'll develop in time and be a pretty good starter for this team. They also bring in Pat Pete, who has definitely lost a step or two but had a bit of a resurgence last year in Minnesota in a pretty zone heavy scheme. So it's going to be interesting to see how he does, kind of switching back to being more of a man corner. But he's a smart player, really good. He's been in the league for a long time, so he may have some beat. He may get beat some just because he's not quite the athlete that he used to be. But he's still a pretty good corner, and I don't think he's going to be in a true weakness or liability for this team. And then they got Levi Wallace, who's just a really, he's a solid starter. Not really expecting, much from him, but it's not going to get beat a whole lot. And then James Pierre is an interesting little nickel corner, maybe play a little bit of slot from this team. It is interesting to see what they are going to do in the slot position, though, just because Joey Porter, Pat Pete, and Levi Wallace are all outside corners. So maybe they have James Pierre, maybe Chandon Sullivan, who they brought in, wanted to play in there. But overall, between Pat Pete, Levi Wallace, Joey Porter, and James Pierre, you got 4 pretty decent corners. Chandon Sullivan is a very low-end guy, but I guess you could do worse than Corey Trice's 7th-round pick as a guy with some athleticism that has some hype as a very, very late-round pick. And then between DeMonte Kazee and Keanu Neal, you'll get pretty decent, box safety play. I do imagine you'll probably have a lot of dime packages with Keanu Neal as more of a linebacker and Kazee is more of a safety. But he's a very okay safety. Not really great at anything, but, you could do a lot worse at safety than him. But overall, this defense is going to defend the run really well. They're going to have to quarterback very well. They're going to be very well coached. And I think this is going to be a defense that's going to help, a weaker offense win a lot of games. It's kind of been the recipe for this team the last couple of years is we're going to be, a very, very great, very, very great defense and just do enough on offense to win. And I imagine that's going to be the same this year. Looking at their schedule, Vegas has their line at 8.5, and my projection is very, very similar. So they're going to open up week 1 at home against the San Francisco 49ers, and I'm calling my shot now. They are going to win that game. Week 1, when offenses usually struggle, having an elite defense like this where everybody's healthy, I think they're going to come in and surprise and beat another good team. They did it last year against Cincinnati, and the year previous they did it to Buffalo. So I do think they're going to win that game. And then they have Cleveland at Vegas, at Houston, and then Baltimore at home. So I do think there's a very, very real possibility that this team could be 4-1 heading into their Week 6 bye. And then they come back from the bye and have to go to the Rams. They have a very beneficial opening part to their schedule. I mean, I think worst case, I think that's 3 wins in their first 6 or 7 games or first 7 weeks. Then they have Jacksonville, Tennessee, and Green Bay coming to their place. They have to go to Cleveland, to Cincy, and then they come home against Arizona and New England. They have to go to Indy, come back home for Cincinnati, and finish their year at Seattle and at Baltimore. But yeah, I do think that, I'm calling my shot that they'll win the San Francisco game. Cleveland, Vegas, Houston, I have them around 4 wins. The Rams, Green Bay, Arizona, I think they'll put them at 7. And I definitely think they can win, one of these games against Cleveland or Cincinnati or Baltimore in their division. So for them to find a way to squeak out another 9-win season, I think is very, very possible. I definitely don't think they're going to be a 10-11 win team and really competing, as a championship or Super Bowl threat. But as a playoff threat, I definitely think they're going to be in the hunt. I do think, Cincy at Seattle and at Baltimore is a pretty tough way to really end your season. So if they're really, trying to make a late season push to make the playoffs, I think those are going to be some hard games to win right at the end there. But I do think they're going to be set up, by a very beneficial front half schedule to get to the 9-win mark that Mike Tomlin has found a way to do every year of his career. Overall, just kind of recapping everything. There is a very, very great culture in place under Mike Tomlin, but Matt Canada is pretty worrisome as your offensive mind. But overall, the offense has some pretty decent pieces at all 3 levels. No true stars, but also no true weaknesses. But this defense is going to be elite. There's no reason it won't, especially if we have healthy T.J. Watt, healthy Alex Highsmith, and healthy Cam Hayward. This pass rush is going to be insane. And they have a very beneficial schedule, having to go against the AFC South, as well as having Green Bay, Vegas, Arizona all coming to them, and then having to go to the Rams. So, I mean, there's definitely a way where they win, 6 games just from the AFC South in those 4 games right there. But overall, I do think it's going to be a very good year for the Steelers, and Mike Tomlin is yet again going to find a way to have a winning record here. So Steelers fans, let me know what you agree with. Let me know where I am wrong about this team. If you stayed around for this entire video, please like, please subscribe, and we'll be back very shortly with our 19th ranked team. Thank you all very much for watching.